Welcome back to our series on the Dance of the Dragons, the infamous Targaryen civil war as described in the books Fire and Blood and the World of Ice and Fire. In Part 7, we'll cover the pivotal battles of the Honeywine, the Red Fork, and the bloodbath at the Fishfeed. These battles were a significant turning point in the Civil War. Given that King Aegon II's main supporters were House Hightower, the Greens assumed the lords and lands of the Reach would side with them. However, many of the major lords from the north and east of the Reach declared for Rhaenyra Targaryen and her blacks, including houses Caswell, Rowan, and Tarly. Several of the Hightower's own vassals, such as houses Beesbury and Costain, also declared for Rhaenyra. With the Reach divided between blacks and greens, and Lord Lionel Tyrell of Highgarden being only a baby, his regent mother declared House Tyrell neutral in the Civil War. Instead of quickly marching armies from the Reach to join with the other green armies in the north to overwhelm the blacks, the Hightowers and their allies had to slowly fight through the Reach itself. Following the early black victories in the Riverlands at Harrenhal and Stonehenge, Sir Otto Hightower, the Hand of the King, sent messages to his nephew, Lord Ormond Hightower, to deploy a large Hightower army to quell these rebellions in the Reach. Ormond assembled a great host and marched out of Oldtown, only to be quickly set upon by black forces. Though far outnumbered, the black forces faced the Hightowers from multiple directions and used harassment tactics to slow their advance. Alan Tarly and Alan Beesbury, known as the Two Allans, joined forces to raid Ormond's camps day and night, kill his scouts, and set fires in his line of march. Farther south, Lord Owen Costain harassed the Hightower's baggage train in their rear. These hit-and-run attacks from multiple directions lasted for several months, but the Hightowers failed to pin down the rebels. By late 129 AC, Ormond received worse news. A large host, equal in size to his own, was descending from north of the Mander, led by Thaddeus Rowan, Lord of Golden Grove. This host consisted of the combined strength of the Rowans, Caswells, and other blacks in the northern Reach. Faced with enemies in front and behind, Ormond decided to halt and camp in a defensive position along the Honeywine. He remained there for several weeks while sending messages to King's Landing urging Aegon II and his brother Aemond to send one of their dragons to aid them. However, Aegon had been badly injured at the Battle of Rook's Rest, and the hot-headed Aemond decided the greatest threat was from his uncle Daemon at Harrenhal, so he ignored Ormond's calls for aid and took Vhagar with his remaining army north into the Riverlands. The Hightower army left Oldtown around mid-129 AC, while Ormond halted his advance soon after the Battle of Rook's Rest in late 129 AC. Rowan's army reached the Honeywine roughly 3 weeks into the new year, 130 AC, a fortnight after the Battle of the Gullet, which took place on the 5th day of 130 AC. In the third week of the year 130 AC, Ormond Hightower's army was caught between two armies while backed against the banks of the Honeywine. From the northeast, Lord Thaddeus Rowan and Tom Flowers, the bastard of Bitterbridge, arrived with a large host of mounted knights. Sir Alan Beesbury, Lord Alan Tarley, and Lord Owen Costain combined their forces and attacked the Hightowers from behind, cutting off their retreat south to Oldtown. Attacked from the front and the rear, Lord Hightower's lines began to crumble, and defeat seemed imminent. Just then, a massive shadow appeared in the sky above them, Prince Daeron Targaryen on his dragon Tessarion. This intervention turned the battle in favor of Aegon's forces, leading to a rout with heavy losses in the retreat. Tom Flowers was killed in the battle, and Lord Owen Costain was mortally wounded by John Roxton wielding the Valyrian steel sword Orphan Maker. Both Alan Tarley and Alan Beesbury were taken captive. The only black commander who managed to escape was Thaddeus Rowan, who retreated north with the remains of his host. This battle was a significant blow to the blacks, ending their offensive operations in the Reach. Most major black commanders in the Reach were either killed or captured, with Thaddeus Rowan being the only exception, though he also eventually bent the knee. Following this defeat, and only a fortnight after the devastating Battle of the Gullet, Lord Bar Emmon suggested that the time had come for a negotiated peace. Instead, Rhaenyra, driven by recent tragedies, decided on a risky strike on King's Landing, as Daemon's strategic plan had lured Aemond and most of the city defenders into the Riverlands. Daeron Targaryen was hailed as a hero that day and knighted by Lord Ormond Hightower with the Valyrian steel longsword Vigilance. Daeron was first called Daeron the Daring after the battle, though he modestly credited Tessarion as the true hero. With young Tessarion now joining the Hightower army, none of the remaining blacks in the Reach could stand against them. Lord Ormond and Prince Daeron enforced the submission of the Rowans of Golden Grove, the Oakhearts of Old Oak, and the Lords of the Shield Islands. The Hightower army spent the following months slowly advancing up the Rose Road, smashing any black forces that attempted to harass them. Daeron Targaryen proved invaluable in scouting ahead of the main host, providing advance warning of enemy traps and ambushes. Meanwhile, a green ally of King Aegon, Lord Jason Lannister, led the Westermen in attacking the Rivermen, many of whom were black supporters of Queen Rhaenyra. The Westermen met the outnumbered Rivermen at a crossing of the Red Fork. The Rivermen repelled 3 attempts of the Greens to cross the river, with Lord Jason Lannister being slain in the 3rd attack by a squire, Pate of Longleaf. Command of the Lannister host was assumed by Sir Adrian Tarbeck. Adrian and 100 knights shed their heavy armor, swam the Red Fork upstream of the fighting, and surprised Lord Tristan Vance's men from the rear. The Rivermen resistance collapsed after Adrian slew Tristan, allowing the remaining Westermen to cross the Red Fork. Lord Jason Lannister's death during the battle at the Red Fork led to Sir Adrian Tarbeck taking command of the victorious Greens, and Lord Peter Piper leading the surviving blacks in retreat. As the Westermen marched east toward Harrenhal, they were confronted at Acorn Hall by blacks led by Lord Joseph Smallwood and Lord Piper. Peter died during the battle, and Joseph retreated into Acorn Hall. According to Mushroom, Lord Piper died of a burst heart when he saw his grandson's head on a spear. 3 days after the battle at Acorn Hall, Adrian and Sir Harry Penny slew each other in renewed fighting after the Rivermen regrouped. Lord Humphrey Lefford took command of the remaining Greens. Rather than besiege the survivors in Acorn Hall, the Lannister host bypassed it and continued their advance. The Lannister army moved slowly due to the age and infirmity of its new commander. When the Westermen reached the western shore of the God's Eye, Lord Lefford discovered he was opposed by Lord Roderick Dustin with 2,000 winter wolves, Lord Forrest Frey with 200 knights and 600 infantrymen, and Rob Rivers with 300 archers from Raventree Hall. The Westermen also faced a threat from the south, with Sir Pate of Longleaf arriving with survivors from previous battles, and Lords Bigglestone, Chambers, and Perrin. The cautious Humphrey did not rush to face either enemy force, but took up a defensive position with his back to the lakeshore. Humphrey then sent ravens to nearby Harrenhal seeking assistance from Prince Aemond, but Red Rob shot down the dozen ravens. The blacks received further reinforcements with the arrival of more riverlords, including Sir Garibald Grey, Lord John Charlton, and young Lord Benjicott Blackwood. Despite cornering the Lannister army, the black commanders faced a difficult decision. The Lannisters had pulled back into defensive position behind disciplined pikemen, so a direct assault would result in heavy losses. Nonetheless, they could not simply wait to starve out the Lannister army, as Aemon's host might eventually rush to their aid. Therefore, they chose to attack. The battle began at dawn the next morning. The Winter Wolves led the attack, their cavalry charging the Lannister spearmen 5 times but suffering grievous losses. Attacked from 3 sides, the Lannister soldiers were gradually forced back into the God's Eye. Hundreds died fighting amongst the lake's reeds, and hundreds more drowned while trying to escape. The battle degenerated into carnage, and it was ultimately the bloodiest land battle of the entire war. The high number of casualties led to it being called the Fishfeed by its participants. The blacks lost Lords Frey, Bigglestone, and Charlton, with 2/3 of the northern soldiers either killed or wounded. The Greens lost their commander, Lord Lefford, as well as Lords Swift and Rain, and Knights Clarent Craighall and Emery Hill. Young Lord Blackwood wept at the sight of all the dead. And that concludes part 7 of our Dance of the Dragons series. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.